Okay, this is my third video of the day and I'm explaining bab 3 of Sejarah Form 5. And as I said, bab 3, bab 2 and bab 1 are all related to each other. So when you're trying to do kebat kan, another reminder, make sure you look at the purple and blue stuff, but also you want to try and relate all of this to each bab if you want to do kebat, because kebat will involve all three in one way or another. So you're gonna try and find a connection between them. It's not that hard to actually find a connection. Just find similar words and you might be able to find a connection. Like for example, anything that mentions kedaulatan, anything that needs kedaulatan. Undang-undang is kedaulatan. So anything about persekutuan is kedaulatan. Anything about raja is kedaulatan. And so on and so forth. So now we're gonna get into the actual thing. I am lazy to use my book and film it because the other room is occupied by my brother and I do not want to kacau him from doing his stuff. So I'm doing it in another room, and I use my cam scanner, and I'm not that good at scanning. So and I also there's 20 pages. I do not want to waste so much time scanning 20 pages. So yeah, bear with me with this ugly pages. Okay. The thing about okay, the first one is latar belakang pemerintahan raja dan demokrasi berparlimen. How did this system raja perlembagaan and this system demokrasi berparlimen actually start? So we want to look back all the way from the past, starting with Kesultanan Melayu Melaka. Everything that happens in Tanah Melayu starts from Kesultanan Melayu Melaka. If you look here, Kedah actually existed before Kesultanan Melayu Melaka. But then, mengakui Pertuanan Kesultanan Melayu Melaka means it admits that Kesultanan Melayu Melaka is the greater kerajaan. It's the greater Kesultanan. Even though Kedah is actually the first one to exist. And there also another reason why you want to talk about Melaka is because all of these rajas are related to Melaka. For example, Johor Riau, Pahang and Perak, all are directly from Melaka. Because after the Portuguese defeated Malacca at 1511, the king of that time ran away to Johor Riau, and he became the king of Johor Riau. So that is where Kesultanan Johor Riau is. And the family members also went to Pahang and Perak, and the bloodline continues there. Maybe not directly from the Raja, but maybe from relatives. But they are still a royal family of Malacca. So that's why Malacca is connected there. And after Johor is Kelantan, Terengganu and Selangor. Terengganu and Selangor are both connected to Johor Riau. And then Kelantan, N9 and Perlis, those not have any direct connections with Melaka, but they are created after Melaka. Maybe they took inspiration from Melaka. So that's why Melaka is the main one. But the sad thing is that nowadays there is no more Sultan in Melaka because after Portuguese took over Melaka, Belanda took over Melaka, British took over Melaka, Melaka had no chance to become a kerajaan again. So after kemerdekaan, now Melaka only has I think also yang di Batuan Negeri. So okay, so what is the ciri-ciri of Kesultanan Melayu Melaka? You see here, ciri-ciri. Number one, they have a raja that has full power, berkuasa mutlak. He has power in pentadbiran, perundangan, dan kehakiman. Number two, his pemerintahan, his rule, his power, the undang-undang that gives him the power is Hukum Kanun Melaka and Undang-Undang Laut Melaka. So they already have a very organized system with rules set since Melayu Melaka. Since Melaka, they already have rules. Number three, the Sultan of Melaka was Muslim. So and that's where the Raja is Ketua Agama Islam comes from. This is the only thing about Melaka that still exists until today. Now we have different rules. Now Raja is not berkuasa mutlak, but Raja is still Ketua Agama Islam. That stays until today. Next, mempunyai pengaruh yang besar bagi membina tradisi dan adat istiadat yang diwarisi oleh Kesultanan Melayu yang muncul kemudiannya. So everything like the yellow color, I think the yellow color of royal family and all the other like royal signs all come from Melaka. They all have a connection from Melaka, either from either from bloodline or from actually being part of Melaka before it came off. I think that's why Kelantan Negeri Sembilan Perlis became their own kerajaan because if I remember correctly, Melaka was quite big. And I believe Melaka took over Negeri Sembilan because Negeri Sembilan is quite near. So yeah, that's why I believe that's why N9 came about after Melaka fell off. But yeah, uh, Melaka has a connection to every other state for Raja. Number 5, Raja-Raja Melayu dianggap sebagai sumber undang-undang, ketua kerajaan dan ketua agama. I'm pretty sure that's something that we should know by now. And kesalahan bagi semua tindakan terletak pada keabsahan. Okay, so basically what this means is the Raja-Raja Melayu is responsible for all of the things that they will do. The Sultan is the leader of the state or the country. This thing I'm gonna mention later when we talk about the Agong, but I'll say it later. Okay. Next one. Before World War II, sebelum Perang Dunia Kedua, we know that British came in, took over NNS, and also after NNS, they went for Perak and then the rest of the countries, NNMB and NNMTB. NNMB has resident, NNMTB has penasihat. And what this means is Raja-Raja Melayu still has power. They are still the ones responsible for taking over the country. However, British now has a voice in their decisions. For NNMB, Raja-Raja Melayu is still the leader. However, British is the one giving them advice through and they call the advisor the resident. So they use system resident. So technically, Raja-Raja Melayu has lost some of its voice because it has to listen to British. However, for NNMTB, it's stronger than NNMB because Penasihat British is elected for NNMTB, but he only gives advice to the Raja. But the main difference is British also takes over the country, like the pembesar stuff. Like they are the pembesar, they are the one running the country in terms of like economy, taxes and so on. But for NNMTB, the Raja chooses people to run the country, not British. So NNMTB has a stronger power. Both still have power, but NNMTB is slightly ahead in terms of power. But Johor and Terengganu are the strongest because Johor and Terengganu's rules make it so that the Raja, they use this system called Raja Berperlembagaan. So this power of Raja Berperlembagaan is different from Undang-Undang Melaka. They changed the rules slightly so that it is harder for British to actually take their power away. They are big brain enough so that the rules that they did, I forgot what's the content of the rules. We learned this in I think it was tingkatan 3. The rules that they made it so it is hard for British to actually penetrate that borderline, that boundary to take over the country as jajahan. So in the end, they had to settle for only Nawangan. And because of that, the kedaulatan, the respect of these negeri Melayu is still there. For some states, they are under British, but not really. Some of them, British is just helping. But in the end, Raja still has power. They still have some respect. So yeah, that's what I mean. Big brain. Kebijaksanaan dipapasi orang Raja Melayu. And because of this, we still have a Raja until today. Some like Melaka were quite unlucky, but only Melaka was actually unlucky. But every other state still has a Raja until today because of how good they are in managing it. Then, when Japan came along, Japanese basically took their power away again. And the thing is, and the only thing that they remained was this, Ketua dalam hal ehwal agama Islam. This is something that has been mentioned for so many years. Raja-Raja Melayu will always be Ketua Agama Islam and also ada Istiadat Melayu. But in this one, we focus more on Islam because the reason why is because Japan does not want to make the people angry because they aren't Muslims. The Raja is Muslim. So the Raja knows better about Islam than they do. So they left Islam to them. And so, memperoleh pendapatan seperti sebelum Perang Dunia Kedua. To make them happier, Japan gave them money basically, so they don't get angry. And this was proven, this was officialized during a meeting with the Japanese army. And the Raja Melayu lost some power because now the government of Japan has to watch them over, so that they don't do any mischievous stuff like helping British. After Perang Dunia Kedua, came Malayan Union. And if you remember correctly from last year, people hated Malayan Union, including the Raja-Raja, because they kehilangan kuasa, no more power. So because they kehilangan kuasa, they have no more power, since it was taken by the King of England, technically. That means British now has control over the country. So the person controlling the country is actually the governor. And the king, the Raja-Raja Melayu, did not like this, so they menentang Malayan Union. And they got help from the orang Melayu that also were against it. So in the end, Malayan Union had to be called off because British could not handle the heat anymore. So instead, they have PTM, Persekutuan Tanah Melayu. So after PTM, the Kedaulatan Raja-Raja Melayu came back because no longer was British taking over the country. Now they can run their own country and British is just advising. And then this one, it didn't say about the top part. It's Raja Perlembagaan dan Demokrasi Berparlimen selepas merdeka. So after independence, the king was still the leader of the country. The only main difference is that now we have a Yang Di-Pertuan Agong. Out of the 9 sultan that is still until today, one of them they take turns every year to become the Agong for 5 years, and they are the Ketua Utama Negara. Now I want to go back into what I wrote here from teacher's reminder. Ketua Kerajaan is Perdana Menteri, while Ketua Negara is Yang Di-Pertuan Agong. What this means is the head of the government is Perdana Menteri. Perdana Menteri is the one that's running the country. However, if the Perdana Menteri is still less powerful than the Yang Di-Pertuan Agong, because the Agong is the one that has to verify the rules. Agong is the one that is head of the army. Agong is the Ketua Agama Islam, Ketua Hak Istimewa Orang Melayu. So Agong is still the most powerful one. So he is the most powerful in the country. Hence, he is the Ketua Negara. Yeah. Kedudukan kuasa dan tugas Yang Di-Pertuan Agong, that is basically termaktub dalam Perlembagaan Persekutuan, means it is already written down in the Perlembagaan. The rules are the ones that show proof that the Raja is the king, that the king has power. It's already written in there. Yang Di-Pertuan Agong is the Ketua Negara. You cannot say Yang Di-Pertuan Agong is the Ketua Negara if the Perlembagaan doesn't say they are the Ketua Negara. That's why Perlembagaan is so important in pemerintahan. Next, ciri Raja Perlembagaan dan Demokrasi Berparlimen mengiktiraf Raja sebagai pemerintah tertinggi negara, tetapi rakyat diberi hak memilih wakil mereka melalui pilihan rakyat untuk membentuk kerajaan. So now you have a dynamic between the Raja and the rakyat. Now rakyat has a voice to choose their leader, and Raja is still the highest leader that is still that is still watching the country. The rakyat is just choosing someone to help the Raja run the country for them. Okay, next kesimpulan. Again, you don't have to memorize that many points. I'll memorize this point, where pemerintahan Raja is actually a form of history. So if we do not have Raja anymore, we will lose a huge part of our history. If we have no more Raja, if we have no more Agong, what is Malaysia then? Malaysia came from system Kesultanan. So if there is no system Raja, then why is Malaysia even existing? Because they already lose their identity, so there is no more kedaulatan. That is basically what the kesimpulan is saying. If it weren't for this system Raja, we will not even be a country. This system Raja is our identity. It is what makes us so berdaulat, what makes us so recognized by other countries. We have a very good history. Next, sejarah dan kedudukan institusi Majlis Raja-Raja. Okay, this is looking very ugly. Okay, the first one. This is about Majlis Raja-Raja, the Council of Kings, Council of Sultan, where there's a meeting between a lot of Raja-Raja. But it first started with the name Durbar. Durbar for NNMB, Perak, Selangor, Pahang, and Nine. So after NNMB was formed, the Raja-Raja weren't that happy. Well, they were they weren't that happy because British now has to deal with their stuff. So to make them slightly happier, they made the Durbar. The Durbar is where these Raja-Raja Melayu have a meeting to discuss about the pentadbiran with British. So yeah, this is a meeting for British to discuss with the Raja-Raja Melayu on what they should be doing. So remember, NNMB consists of Perak, Pahang, Selangor, and yeah, and 9, Negeri Sembilan. And the other members in the Durbar include the resident. Remember, we are using system resident in NNMB. Also the Setiausaha. The Setiausaha is the secretary. Without the Setiausaha, how can who will be the one writing what happens in the meeting? It's very important for you to write something in the meeting, like how we have a secretary in the class meeting, because we need to record down what people are saying. If we don't have a record of what people are saying, how do we know that they actually said it? So that's why we have a Setiausaha to write down our records. The literal meaning of Durbar is perjumpaan atau persidangan, and it is a meeting between Raja and British. The first Durbar was held in Perak, because remember, Perak is the first state to be taken over by British. After Durbar and after NNMB and NNMTB were combined, and then the whole Japan thing happened, and then after Japan lost, Malayan Union happened. So to make the Sultan happy, the British made Majlis Sultan or the Council of Sultans, and it is led by the governor. And what the function of this Majlis Sultan is to discuss with each other about things regarding about Islam and other stuff that the governor wants to talk about. However, this thing never happened, and this is because, as I said earlier, the Raja were very, 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 very unhappy because they've lost their power. The only thing they can talk about now is Islam. Anything else that they need to talk about, they have to ask the governor. Governor, can you do this? And governor is the one that has the final say. Governor is still the person at the highest level. The Sultan were not happy with that. So because of that, they boycott the Majlis Sultan, and this thing never even happened. So remember, 2 years later, MU got cancelled. So this whole thing, governors, Raja Melayu, this, none of them actually ever met together because there was this whole boycott going on. So in the end, after PTM was formed, they changed the name to Majlis Raja. And the difference here and this is because for this one, the governor is the one running the thing. The governor is the one running the Majlis. But for this one, the Raja handled this all by themselves. 9 of them, all by themselves. The only one helper that they have is the Penyimpan Mohor Besar Raja. And this is basically means Setiausaha, secretary. So, yeah. Again, same thing, except that British doesn't have any more thing to do with them. Like Raja Melayu have the right to ask help from the Busurojaya Tinggi British about how to make the law, but they have the final say this time. It's no longer the governor that is doing the decisions. It's the Raja themselves doing the decisions. And that is the main difference between MSS and MRR. After Merdeka, MRR still is the same, but there were a few adjustments. Number 1, Melaka and Pulau Pinang who do not have Raja also become part of the MRR. Number 2, Sabah and Sarawak also become part of MRR after they join Malaysia. And this is because they want a representative for every state. However, since they do not have Sultan, they cannot be in the running for choosing the Agong. So yeah, they cannot choose the Agong, they cannot choose the Timbalan Agong. And I forgot what else they cannot do. But some meetings, they are still part of it. Now, what is the Mohor Besar Raja? Mohor Besar Raja is basically a symbol of power of the Raja of MRR, of the Raja Melayu. And it is kept by the secretary, Penyimpan Mohor Besar Raja. And what this thing is actually just a chop. This chop is very powerful. It shows the significance of this Raja, because the chop itself contains Jata Negara Kerajaan Sembilan Negeri Melayu. So it has the Jata Negara, Jata Negeri, which is I forgot what it's called, the logo of each state. From Selangor, Kelantan, Perak, Pahang, Negeri Sembilan, Terengganu, Perlis, and Kedah. So all of those are written in here. And then in Jawi, it wrote Mohor Besar Raja Negeri Melayu in Jawi. So I think they will ask about this one. They will ask what is the Bohor Besar Raja-Raja written in? Jawi. Now, what is the function of this Majlis Raja-Raja? So, number one, memilih yang di-Batuan Agong dan timbalan yang di-Batuan Agong. If you remember correctly, I just mentioned that. Second, bersetuju atau tidak bersetuju sembarang undang-undang. So, any law, that most laws, you need to have a verification from the Majlis Raja-Raja. Because they have to go through the Agong. So the Agong will call them to discuss. What do we do with this? The Agong has the final say, but the Agong discusses with the Majlis Raja-Raja to decide whether they want to pass the law or not. There's only one thing that they are not responsible in, and that is to the financial budget of the country. Number 3, memberikan nasihat berkaitan dengan pelantikan jawatan tertentu. Again, Agong is the one in charge of picking these important people, like Ketua Hakim Negara, Ketua Polis Negara, Ketua Audit Negara, Hakim Mahkamah Atasan, and also the SPR, Ahli SPR. So, the Majlis Raja-Raja is to discuss with the Agong to see who they want to choose. Number 4, menjadi rujukan dalam perubahan dasar berhubungan dengan kedudukan istimewa orang Melayu, Bumi Putra, dan kepentingan sah kaum lain. Remember that, again, Agong is the one in charge of this. So, the Sultan, the Majlis Raja-Raja, is for discussions on those things as well. About kedudukan istimewa orang Melayu, Sarawak and Sabah. Bumi Putra, Sarawak and Sabah, and also to make sure that kaum lain also have their hak. Number 5, menjadi lembaga pengampunan. So, they are the ones that decide whether the Agong should forgive or not. Memperkenankan perubahan bersama Perdana Negara. If they want to decide where the borders are, they need to ask the Sultan whether they want to change the borders or not. And lastly, memperkenankan pindaan perlembagaan. So they are the ones that recommend any change of law in certain things. So, kesimpulan, again, a dynamic between democracy and Raja. Where democracy is the people can make their own law, and Raja is the people can discuss about if they want to pass that law or not. So there's a really good dynamic between these two sides. Third one, yang di-Batuan Agong and Raja dalam perlembagaan persekutuan. So remember, there are 9 Raja. Oh God. Yeah, there are 9 Raja, and the Agong is chosen in order from one of those 9. So it's like N9 Selangor, Perlis, Terengganu, Kedah, Kelantan, Pahang, Johor, Perak, and then after that it goes back to Negeri Sembilan, Selangor, Perlis, Terengganu, and so on. And basically the way they get chosen is the Majlis Raja agrees to elect one person every 5 years. Now, you don't have to know who is the Yang di-Batuan Agong. You only need to remember, but there's one that you might need to remember is that for Kedah, almarhum Sultan Abdul Halim Muazzam Shah, he actually became the Agong twice. They are the same. He is Agong twice. So yeah, that is worth remembering about. And yeah, they became Agong for 5 years unless they step down. Like for example, the Kelantan punya Agong, he stepped down after 3 years. We don't know why, but he was involved in a good amount of controversy. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but I'm not gonna mention more. Kedudukan yang di-Batuan Agong. In perkara 32 perlembagaan persekutuan. Perkara 32. Teacher always likes to mention 32. Perkara 32 mentions that yang di-Batuan Agong is basically the head of the country, ketua negara. Si ketua utama negara. And the order of line, I don't think this is important, but it's yang di-Batuan Agong, Raja Pemasaran Agong, that's the Queen. The other kings, the Yang Bituan Negeri, the ex-wives, PM and Timbalan PM. Okay, next is kuasa yang di-Pertuan Agong. So what is the power of yang di-Pertuan Agong? They have a lot of kuasa. There are three: executive, perundangan, and kehakiman. For executive, they are the ones that choose the important roles. Executive means management. So they choose the important people to manage the country. For example, Perdana Menteri and Jemaah Menteri, also known as cabinet. So the way they choose it is, out of the people that won the election, they choose whoever is recommended to become the prime minister out of those people who won the election. So Ahli Dewan Rakyat means the people who won the election. And the only thing that you have to consider other than the Agong accepting is that more than half or a majority of the people in the Dewan Negara, Dewan Rakyat, support this decision. And then after he chooses the Perdana Menteri, the Perdana Menteri gives advice on who else to choose. For example, the Timbalan Menteri, Menteri Kabinet yang lain, and they choose it from Ahli Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara. What is Dewan Rakyat? What is Dewan Negara? We'll get to that later. Next, perantikan jawatan penting. So yang di-Pertuan Agong chooses those very important roles that I mentioned in bab 2. For example, Peguam Negara, Panglima Angkatan Tentera, and Ketua Audit Negara. They are the one that chooses the head lawyer, not head lawyer. Head lawyer. They also choose the army leader. They choose the Audit Negara, that's like the finance person. They choose the Ahli of SPR. They choose the Ahli of the police, and they also choose who is in the management of the army. Thirdly, yang di-Pertuan Agong is the head of the army, and remember that he chooses the Majlis Angkatan Tentera, the people who are managing the army. He is helped by those people to help with the management, and melantik diplomat Malaysia ke luar negara, that is the Agong choosing an ambassador to talk to other countries. And for ambassadors to come to Malaysia, they have to meet the Agong first before they can do other stuff. Now, this is very important. Apparently, my teacher always mentioned this. It should be in your objective. Why is there always this urusan Sri Paduka Baginda? You can see this Sri Paduka Baginda actually means Agong. So why is Agong in every single letter that is from the Kerajaan? The answer is because Ketua Negara. Since Agong is the head of the country, everything under the management like Jemaah Menteri, Kabinet Negeri, and also like any official notice from the government is going to talk about Agong because Agong is still the leader. Next one, kuasa perundangan. So kuasa perundangan means that the Yang di-Pertuan Agong can decide what rules can go through and what rules will not go through. So the way they do this is persidangan parlimen, which is where the Agong has the power to call the parliament to discuss on whether they want the rules or not. And after a few years, the only person that can actually cancel the parliament is the Agong himself, membubarkan parlimen. Next, yang di-Pertuan Agong is obviously Ketua Agama Islam. But remember that Sultan is Ketua Agama Islam in their own state. So yang di-Pertuan Agong is the Ketua Agama Islam in Wilayah Persekutuan, Melaka, Pulau Pinang, Sarawak, and Sabah. And also their own country. Because remember, Ketua Agama Islam is the Sultan of that state. The Agong is still the Sultan of his own state. So he is still the Ketua Agama Islam of that state. But he also takes care of Wilayah Persekutuan, Melaka, PP, Sarawak, and Sabah. Next is the same thing again, hak keistimewaan orang Melayu dan Bumiputra as well as kepentingan sah kaum lain. He is the one managing all of those. And lastly, he is the one that can start darurat. Darurat means, what's it called again? A state of emergency. So he is the one that can initiate an emergency. A state of emergency causes everything to only be under the Agong. That means anything that should only just go through parliament now goes through the Agong. So like if they want to cancel the government, or if they want to have any controversy inside the thing, if there is a problem with the country, Agong will end up being the highest in power during that time. Next one, Ketua Kuasa Kehakiman. Remember that they are the one in charge of choosing people for important roles. That includes Hakim. So the Perdana Menteri only gives him advice, but the Agong is the one actually choosing the Hakim, the Ketua Hakim Negara. And after he gets advice from the Perdana Menteri, he also has to discuss with the Majlis Raja-Raja, as I mentioned earlier. So Hakim Mahkamah Atasan, remember Mahkamah Atasan is the highest in court. So Ketua Hakim Negara, biasanya Mahkamah Rayuan, blah 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 blah. So yeah, again, as I mentioned in bab 2, Yang di-Pertuan Agong can also ask to be forgiven, can also forgive other people. So like if you got sentenced to something that you think is unfair, you can ask the Agong to give you a pardon or mengampun. So he will either pardon you, just let you go. He will maybe reduce the sentence, or maybe he will also let you or not care about you. Next one, Amalan Demokrasi dan Pengasingan Kuasa. This one I didn't really highlight because on that day I was unavailable. I had to go somewhere. But apparently, teacher mentioned about how the pilihan raya goes. So, if they ask, what is the amalan pilihan raya? So, what pilihan raya is? Election. Election occurs every 5 years and they choose the leader of the country. That is a general thing. But how does the pilihan raya go? So, firstly, antara politik-politik yang terlibat dalam pilihan raya bagi memperoleh firstly there has to be a few political parties that can participate in the election, and the reason why they want to be in the election is because they want to gain support from the rakyat, so that they can take over the country. After that, these political parties will have their campaign. This campaign pilihan raya is for the rakyat, the people, to know who their leader will be, and who their future leader will be. Who should they be voting for? And also this manifesto thing. Every party must have a manifesto, like a set of promises that they have and they will be like, I promise that I will do this if I become the Perdana Menteri, and so on and so forth. And then this one, rakyat menyemak nama pada daftar pemilih sebelum mengundi. Next, they want to check. They want to check if they are registered in the voting list. After that, they will vote. And the thing is here, undi ialah rahsia. That means the votes are done in secret, and they show bukti keabsahan kerajaan yang dipilihan rakyat. They show the legitimacy. Legitimacy means they show how it is deserved, how fair it is for people to choose. Because no one will know that you're choosing that person. No one will actually change the results, apparently. So you won't be influenced by like other people, like please choose this, please choose this. You make the final call. Nobody will know who you choose. So because of that, your undi is rahsia. Your votes are a secret, so you can choose whatever you want. So the leader will be the most fair because the leader is based on everyone's own personal opinions, not being forced by other people. And lastly, undi dilakukan dengan penggunakan prosedur yang terus systematic. What this means is there is a specific way to do a voting session, an election. It's not just simply, okay, you go to this stall, you vote, and then we count the votes, and done. No. There is a process. You have to choose who is the Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya. You have to choose where the locations are. You have to choose where to vote. You have to choose who is going to vote. You have to choose when you're going to vote. You have to write the name down. You have to know how to vote properly. You have to vote at a secret place. You have to make sure that your vote is kept secret. You have to have a chop. There's so many things you have to do before your vote is actually going to be counted. So because of that, it's not simply done. There's actually a way, a procedure to actually do the undian. So that proves how important an election is and how fair it is. So if they ask something about fairness, like what makes pilihan raya so important? What makes pilihan raya so good? Why do we need pilihan raya in the country? What is the are we sure we can trust pilihan raya to choose our leader? Why we can do so? Then you answer this. Because pilihan raya has its own procedure. It is very systematic. Your votes will be kept secret. You need there's a list of registers, and you need to check if you're registered or not. And you already know your parties before the election, and you are the ones and you are the one that chooses the leader based on what they have told you, what their manifesto is, so on and so forth. Okay, this is very bad. This is my bad. So kebebasan asasi, this is freedom of speech. Or not just freedom of speech, just freedom in general. So, it is hak yang dimiliki oleh seorang individu di sisi undang-undang. The rights of a person in law, like what rights do you have? Do you have human rights? Do you have rights to freedom of speech? Do you have religious rights? And so on. So, the main part of this freedom is there are four: kebebasan diri, agama, pendidikan, and bersuara. So for diri, everyone is free as a person. They cannot be slaves. They cannot be killed by other people. They cannot be executed unless the law says so. Like for example, you are the one controlling your own body. If you become a slave, that is illegal. Unless you are, yeah. If you are a slave, that is illegal. If there is no kerajaan that is involved in you being a slave, it's completely illegal. You have the right to yourself. Next one, agama, freedom of religion. We know that most people in this country are Muslim, including me, but you can be any religion you want. Because Malaysia is a country that allows freedom of religion. You can be Christian if you want to, you can be Buddhist, you can be Hindu, if you are born that way. For the conversion stuff, that is a bit more meaty, that is a bit more controversial. But in general, you can do whatever you want with your religion. Like, if you are Christian, then you can go to the church. No, it's not like other countries where like churches are hated, or in France, for example, where people hate Muslims. Okay, that was political. But anyways, if you get what I'm saying here, it's basically, even though Islam is the official religion of Malaysia, you can still practice your own religions. Number 3, hak berkenaan dengan pendidikan. Okay, tidak boleh ada diskriminasi terhadap warga negara atas alasan agama, ras, keturunan atau tempat lahir. You have the rights to defend yourself, and but you do not have the rights to say someone else is bad because of their religion, because of their race, because of where they are born. Like, you shouldn't be discriminating other people basically. You shouldn't be racist. You shouldn't say that Sabahans only climb on trees. You shouldn't say Islam is bad, and so on and so forth. You do not have the right to actually offend other people. You have the right to speak, however. You have the right to speak. You have the right to protest. You have the right to have your own management or persatuan, your own group. However, you need how much you can say, how much you can actually say that is controversial, what you can actually do, those are actually limited. So that's why it is tidak bersifat mutlak. You have freedom of speech. You can say some stuff that can be considered controversial. But there are some stuff that you shouldn't be mentioning. For example, hak keistimewaan orang Melayu. You cannot question about that hak Melayu because Yang di-Pertuan Agong is handling that. And also, you cannot speak shit about Yang di-Pertuan Agong because Yang di-Pertuan Agong is your leader of your country. So if you're saying something bad about him, you are disrespecting your own king. So you probably will end up in jail. You also cannot you also cannot like say you hate this country, you hate the flag, you're gonna burn the flag, you hate Islam, you burn the Quran. Anything religious stuff, anything about the country, that is all not allowed to be talked about because that is considered too offensive. That is not that is above freedom of speech. Like you can say some stuff like you don't like some things about the country and so on, but you cannot go out of your way to actually offend something because you don't like it. Like there is no wrong in what they're doing, right? So why would you want to go out of your way to talk shit about them, right? So that's what this kebebasan bersuara actually is. It is not bersifat mutlak. It is not absolutely free power of speech, freedom of speech. You can say some stuff, but you cannot say everything. And there is a limit, sekatan. And why do we have this limit? Memastikan ketenteraman dan kesejahteraan awam terjadi dalam masyarakat yang demokratik. We want to make sure that nothing bad happens in the masyarakat. Because if someone says something offensive, the masyarakat will go very, very bad. So that is why we also have this akta and suhakam. So suhakam basically is responsible for making sure that everyone has their own rights. While we have this akta hasutan and akta mesin cetak dan penerbitan. Why do we have this akta? Number one, mengawal perkara yang sensitif dipersoalkan secara terbuka seperti agama. We want to make sure that nothing sensitive actually is talked about, because we shouldn't be talking about all those stuff, like for example religion. Second one, obviously, to make sure that there's nothing bad going on between kaum. Yeah, some stuff should not be mentioned. That one is similar. Make sure that the rakyat is harmony, so that the negara does not go into haywire, so it's still stable. And number four, make sure that there is no fake news. Mengawal media massa daripada menyiarkan maklumat yang tidak konkret, yang tidak benar, yang dikira sebagai fitnah, yang tidak sahih. We do not you have freedom to say anything you want, but if you say any fake news, like for example, the king actually has a son, and the king actually has another son that is thrown out of the family and he got killed. I'm saying it simply. I cannot say that. Okay, this is an example. This is an example. You shouldn't be spreading fake news. Okay, pengasingan kuasa dalam pemerintahan. We mentioned about how our country is quite berdaulat because we have a system where people have their own places that they can do. So they can focus on one thing, and it creates a very stable management. So there are three main bodies. And Yang di-Pertuan Agong again is the leader of all of them. And Majlis Raja discusses with Agong on choosing the leaders of these badan. But there are three main bodies: Executive, Perundangan, and Kehakiman. So Executive, that is the whole cabinet stuff. Perdana Menteri, Jamaah Menteri, Kementerian. For Kehakiman, it's about the king, not the king, the judge. Ketua Hakim Negara, atasan and bawahan. We'll get to that later. And for Badan Perundangan, we have the Parliament. The Parliament is divided into two, which is Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat. So first of all, Badan Perundangan. This parliament is proof of democracy, because remember, we choose the parliament members through pilihan raya, and it shows that Malaysia is a country that can let its people have a voice in what they can do to the country. So the leaders of the country have the power to make their own rules, mengubah undang-undang. They can also change the rules. They can check what is their main focus of their kerajaan. They are the ones handling the financial stuff of the country, and they can also introduce tax. The people in the Badan Perundangan include Parlimen, Dewan Negara, Dewan Rakyat, and Agong. Not Parlimen. Dewan Negara, Dewan Rakyat, and Agong. Agong is still part of Perundangan, because Agong is still the head of everything. That means Agong is still the head of Perundangan. So there are three bodies: Agong, Perwakilan, and Negara. Rakyat and Negara. So for Agong, he is the one that decides whether the law should be confirmed or not. And then we have Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat. Dewan Rakyat is made out of people that are chosen through elections, and they are the one that discuss the law. after they discuss the law, it goes to the Dewan Negara. The Dewan Negara or the Senate is chosen by the Agong, and they are comprised of people that actually contributed a lot to the country. And what they have to do is membahaskan rang undang-undang yang diluluskan oleh Dewan Rakyat. They are the one that should discuss whether they should actually go on with this rule or not. So it is higher than Dewan Rakyat. The people in the Dewan Negara are called Senate or senators. For Dewan Undangan Negeri, every country except Wilayah Persekutuan has a Dewan Undangan Negeri, which is basically parliament but for state. And the people in that dun is called Adun, Ahli Dun. So yeah, same thing, they make their own laws for their own country. Next is Badan Executive, the people managing the country. So the main part is the cabinet, made by the Perdana Menteri and other ministers as well. And what is the main task of this Perdana Menteri? They are the one running the country. Menggubal asal negara, melaksanakan pembangunan. And then Perdana Menteri is the head of the Jamaah or the cabinet. And the main thing about Jamaah Menteri is they all must work together. There cannot be any controversy, there cannot be any fights between Jamaah Menteri. They have to all be in one voice. They have to all work together and all agree to something at the end. Like they can argue whether it is or not, but in the end they have to agree on something. If they don't agree on something, they have to meletakkan jawatan. They have to resign. And why? It's because they want to make sure that there's nothing bad going on in the cabinet. No perselisihan. So, let me see. So, a proof that this Jamaah Menteri thing has started since a while ago is that Kelantan did it first. So, it was Sultan Muhammad II who made this system Jamaah Menteri to make taking over Kelantan easier. And they have these people that handle it. And then it went on until today. Next. Majlis Mesyuarat Kerajaan Negeri. For negeri, kuasa eksekutif terletak pada sultan atau raja atau yang di-Pertuan Negeri. So each state also has their own government except for wilayah persekutuan. For Semenanjung Malaysia, they call it the Exco. The parliament for each state is called the Exco in Semenanjung. Majlis Mesyuarat Kerajaan Negeri. But for Sarawak and Sabah, we just call it Cabinet Negeri. For Menteri Besar, they is used in, I believe, Semenanjung. But for Sabah and Sarawak, we use Ketua Menteri. Lastly is Kehakiman. So Kehakiman, they are the ones that apply the law. They are the ones that enforce the law onto people in the country. The leader is obviously Ketua Hakim Negara. And the judges, the Hakim, are chosen to make sure that there is fairness in the country. The judge body, the Badan Kehakiman, is to make sure that there is a fair treatment of the people in the country. Okay, menyelesaikan konflik kerajaan dan negeri dan kerajaan persekutuan. What this means is any conflicts, any problems that they have with their own state or their own country, they can send it to Badan Kehakiman, and then the Kehakiman will choose it by themselves. So Badan Kehakiman got two levels, atasan and bawahan. For atasan and bawahan, atasan is the stronger, the more mighty, the bigger court, while bawahan is the less power but still got power lah. So it is according to power: Persekutuan, Rayuan, Mahkamah Tinggi, Session Magistrate, and then for each state they got Mahkamah Syariah, and then they got Mahkamah Anak Negeri, and they also got Mahkamah Jubana. But yeah, for Sabah and Sarawak they have Anak Negeri, and for every state they also have Mahkamah Syariah, which is for Islam stuff. The main thing about this Badan Hakiman is the Hakim cannot be a politician. Because if the Hakim is a politician, then if any corruption if any form of corruption involves the government and the judge is part of that corruption, is it really a fair thing? Of course, it's easier to say than to apply, right? But that's the main thing. The Hakim cannot be chosen, cannot be part of politics because they want to make sure that that everything is fair. There is no abuse of power. There is no rasuah going on. So that's why Hakim cannot be taken over by politician. That's why politician cannot Hakim cannot be politician. That's why Agong is the head of everything. That's why cabinet is one thing. They want Dun is one thing. They want to make sure that there is fairness in this country. Lastly, keunikan amalan demokrasi berparlimen di negara kita. What is so unique about demokrasi berparlimen in our country? Okay, number one, gabungan unsur tradisional dan moden dalam pentadbiran. Keunikan pemerintahan di Malaysia teradu antara unsur tradisional dengan moden. Unsur tradisional terletak pada kedudukan raja sebagai raisa sosial politik di masyarakat Melayu. Unsur moden ialah demokrasi berparlimen. So remember, ciri traditional is king. Ciri modern is demokrasi berparlimen. These two go hand in hand, or we call it sistem mekanisme semak dan imbang. Okay, so this dynamic between raja and parliament is what makes our country stable enough. Okay, I know our country isn't that stable, but stable enough. So we not only have a voice for our people, but we also have a form of history that still exists. So how does this semak and imbang dynamic work? Pemerintahan raja berperanan bagi mengimbangi pemerintahan demokrasi. So the king's function is to make sure that the parliament or the cabinet does not have too much power. Kuasa mengimbang yang ada pada raja mampu meredakan konflik yang berlaku dalam demokrasi seperti pertikaian parti politik yang berbagai ideologi. So, if there's any problem that happens in the cabinet, the Agong can kacau, can interfere and try and solve it themselves. And also this semak dan imbang thing, let me just see what semak dan imbang means. Semak dan imbang. Wait, lag me a bit. Check and balance. Okay, this is what I thought. So what this means is the king checks on the parliament to make sure that there is no problem going on. The king also makes sure that the power of the parliament is balanced, the power of the cabinet is balanced, so that there is no abuse of power going on. The parliament makes sure that the king doesn't do anything stupid and limits his power. So that's the check and balance thing. There's also check and balance, same as imbang, through how the power is distributed. Like got hakim, got cabinet, executive, got perundangan. Like for example, remember that the kehakiman cannot be involved in parliament. That's because we want to make sure that things are fair. So if there's any problem that goes on in the parliament, it can be brought onto the court and it will be as fair as possible. Next, kuasa budi bicara raja. The very special thing about our country is that in our country, raja has a say. The raja has the final say in what the parliament does. Kuasa yang boleh dilaksanakan oleh baginda tanpa mendengar atau menurut nasihat ketua kerajaan dalam perkara tertentu. So, So they have Yang di-Batuan Agong has the right to not even ask anyone, not even Majlis Raja, not even Perdana Menteri, on what he should be doing. Even if he does, he has the final say. So that's what Kuasa Budi Bicara means. So yang di-Batuan Agong has the right to choose the Perdana Menteri without asking other people for help. He also has the right to choose other Raja yang di-Batuan Negeri. No, Raja yang di-Batuan Negeri has the right to choose who the chief minister is without asking anyone else for help. They make their own words. They do not need anyone else to help them. They can do it by themselves. And they can also make decisions on other things. Like for example, if the person wants to disband parliament, the Yang di-Batuan Agong has the right not to actually do it. They can do it. They can say, let's not do it now, let's do it later. And same thing with Dun and Yang di-Batuan Negeri or Raja. If the Dun wants to disband, Raja can say, wait a bit, then you can disband. They cannot do anything about it because the Raja has the final say. Next, kerjasama politik. Menekankan soal perkongsian kuasa antara kaum. So, what this means is, you know how Barisan Nasional works, BN, or you know how Pakatan Harapan work with PH and DAP, or how PAS and BN make PN. The main thing about that is these political parties work together, even though they come from different races, to work together to make sure that the country runs as smooth as possible. And this all started in the first election when we have Parti Perikatan, which is known now as BN, where they have MIC, MCA, and UMNO, Malay, Indian, and Chinese, where they all work together to make Parti Perikatan, and then they won the election. So that shows how much important it is for races, for multiple people to work together from different backgrounds to make the country a better place. Another example is after BN lost its rule, it lost to Pakatan Harapan. How did it lose to Pakatan Harapan? It lost because multiple parties work together, like DAP and Warisan, Bersatu, and all of those work together. Amanah, all of those work together to make Kerajaan Persekutuan. Different people from different backgrounds work together to take out BN. Okay, then this is the kesimpulan. Again, read yourself. If you want to know more about Kebat,